Cooper's heart stopped when he saw the email. Subject: Scholarship Revocation Notice. 3 years of relentless studying, sleepless nights, and a dream of becoming a lawyer, gone in a single sentence. He sat frozen in his cramped Brooklyn apartment, the glow of his laptop casting harsh shadows across his face. The world he'd built meticulously, painstakingly, was crumbling, and all because of a choice he'd made 6 months ago. A choice named Julian. Cooper had always been the golden boy of his small Ohio town, valedictorian, track star, the kid who'd made it out. A full-ride scholarship to Columbia Law was his ticket to a life as parents. Factory workers with calloused hands and weary eyes could only dream of. But then he met Julian Rivera, the architect with a smile that could unravel anyone. And everything changed. Julian wasn't just a fling, he was a force, a whirlwind of passion and ambition who made Cooper question every plan he'd ever made. They'd met at a gallery opening in the Lower East Side, where Julian's firm was showcasing a sustainable housing project. Cooper, dragged along by a friend, had been nursing a cheap glass of wine when Julian approached, all sharp cheekbones and warm brown eyes. "You look like you're judging the art or the people," Julian had teased, his voice low and playful. Cooper, usually guarded, laughed a real laugh, the kind that felt like letting go. By the end of the night, they were sharing stories on a rooftop, the city sprawling beneath them like a promise. Julian was everything Cooper wasn't: spontaneous, fearless, unapologetically himself. He was a queer Puerto Rican man who'd clawed his way into New York's cutthroat architecture scene, designing buildings that made people stop and stare. Cooper, with his Midwestern restraint and carefully curated life, was captivated. Their first kiss, under the flickering lights of a subway platform at 2 a.m., felt like the start of something bigger than either of them. But love, Cooper learned, came with a cost. When Julian's firm offered him a once-in-a-lifetime project in San Francisco, a chance to design a community center that could redefine his career, Cooper faced a choice: stay in New York, chase his law degree, and keep the scholarship that was his lifeline, or follow Julian across the country, risking everything for a man he'd known for mere months. He chose Julian. The decision wasn't impulsive, it was agonizing. Cooper spent nights poring over pros and cons, his spreadsheet a battleground of logic versus longing. His parents' voices echoed in his head: "Don't throw it all away, Coop." Not for some guy. But Julian wasn't just some guy. He was the one who made Cooper feel alive, who saw the parts of him he'd hidden even from himself. So, Cooper deferred his scholarship, packed his life into 2 suitcases, and moved to San Francisco, promising himself he'd reapply to law school once Julian's project was done. San Francisco was a shock to his system, vibrant, chaotic, alive in a way New York never was. Their apartment in the Mission District was small, but theirs filled with Julian's sketches and Cooper's law books, a testament to their shared dreams. Julian worked late, his passion for his project infectious, while Cooper took a job as a legal assistant to pay the bills. They built a life together: lazy Sunday mornings at the farmer's market, stolen kisses in the fog, debates over whose turn it was to do the dishes. For the first time, Cooper felt like he belonged somewhere, not because of a plan, but because of a person. But the email changed everything. Columbia had revoked his scholarship. Deferrals weren't guaranteed. They said, and his spot had been given to someone else. The words blurred on the screen as Cooper's chest tightened. He'd gambled his future on love, and now he was empty-handed. "Coop," Julian's voice broke through the haze. He stood in the doorway, his gray sweater slightly rumpled from a day at the studio, concern etched into his features. "What's wrong?" Cooper couldn't speak. He slid the laptop toward Julian, who scanned the email, his expression shifting from confusion to horror. "Oh, God. Coop, I didn't know." "You didn't know?" Cooper's voice cracked, sharper than he intended. "I gave up everything for you, Julian." "Everything?" Julian flinched, but he didn't back away. "We'll figure this out. Together. I promise." But Cooper wasn't sure he believed in promises anymore. The next morning, the apartment felt smaller, the air thick with unspoken tension. Cooper sat at the kitchen table, staring at his coffee, while Julian moved quietly, as if afraid to break the fragile silence. They hadn't spoken much since the fight. Cooper's words, "I gave up everything for you," hanging like a guillotine between them. Cooper's mind was a storm. He'd always prided himself on control, on mapping out every step of his life. But now, at 25, he was adrift. No scholarship, no law school, just a job pushing papers for a lawyer who barely remembered his name. And Julian, who'd promised a future together, was the reason he was here, untethered. "I'm going for a walk," Cooper muttered, grabbing his jacket. Julian looked up, his eyes pleading, but Cooper couldn't meet them. He needed air, space, anything to drown out the noise in his head. San Francisco's streets were alive with color. Murals splashed across buildings, the hum of street vendors, the tang of salt in the air. Cooper wandered aimlessly, ending up at Ocean Beach, where the Pacific roared against the shore. He sat on the sand, watching waves crash, and let himself feel the weight of his choice. He didn't regret Julian, not exactly. But he regretted trusting that love could be enough. His phone buzzed. A text from his sister. "Ellie, back in Ohio, heard about the scholarship. You okay?" Cooper's throat tightened. Ellie was the only one in his family who hadn't judged him for coming out, for moving across the country. But even she didn't understand why he'd thrown away his future. "I'm fine," he texted back, a lie that felt easier than the truth. When he returned home, Julian was waiting, his laptop open to a job listing for a legal assistant at nonprofit. "Look, Coop," he said, his voice cautious but warm. "This place does pro bono work for queer youth. It's not law school, but it's something you'd be amazing at." Cooper wanted to snap, to tell Julian he didn't need pity. But the earnestness in Julian's eyes stopped him. Instead, he nodded, taking the laptop. "I'll look at it." The nonprofit job became a lifeline. Cooper threw himself into it, helping kids navigate a world that often rejected them. Their stories of being kicked out, of fighting to be seen, mirrored his own struggles, the ones he'd buried under ambition and perfectionism. The work was grueling, underpaid, but gave him purpose. For a while, it felt like enough. At home, Julian was trying. He cooked dinners, left notes on the fridge, planned date nights to rekindle what they'd lost. One evening, they drove to Twin Peaks, the city glittering below them. Julian took Cooper's hand, his touch steady. "I know I can't fix this," he said, "but I'm here. I love you." Cooper wanted to believe him. He leaned into Julian, their foreheads touching, and for a moment, the world felt right again. But doubt lingered, a shadow he couldn't shake. Then came a click. It was late, Julian asleep beside him, when Cooper's phone lit up with a notification. A friend from Columbia had forwarded an email, a call for applicants to a new legal fellowship in New York. It wasn't his scholarship, but was a chance to get back on track. The deadline was tomorrow. Cooper's heart raced. He could apply, maybe even get in. But it would mean leaving Julian, leaving San Francisco, leaving the life they'd built. He stared at the screen, his finger hovering over the apply button. One click, and everything could change again. He pressed it. The application was sent, a digital confession of Cooper's wavering heart. He didn't tell Julian. Not that night. Not the next morning when Julian kissed him goodbye before heading to the studio. The secret sat heavy in Cooper's chest, a betrayal he couldn't justify but couldn't undo. Days passed, and life continued its uneasy rhythm. Cooper buried himself in work, drafting legal documents for kids who reminded him too much of his younger self, scared, defiant, desperate to be enough. Julian, oblivious to the application, was consumed by his project, the community center nearing its groundbreaking. He'd come home late, sketches spilling from his bag, his eyes alight with purpose. Cooper envied that fire, resented it even because it reminded him of what he'd lost. One night, over takeout tacos, Julian noticed the distance. "You've been quiet," he said, setting down his fork. "Talk to me." Co-op. Cooper's stomach twisted. He wanted to confess, to tell Julian about the fellowship, about the part of him that still dreamed of courtrooms and gavels. But the words wouldn't come. "Just tired," he lied, forcing a smile. Julian didn't push, but his eyes lingered, searching. A week later, the email came. "Congratulations, Cooper Ellis. You've been shortlisted for the Feldman Legal Fellowship." Cooper read it in the break room, his heart pounding. The fellowship offered a stipend, mentorship, a path back to law school. But it was in New York. He'd have to leave in 3 weeks. He didn't tell Julian right away. Instead, he wrestled with the decision alone, pacing the apartment while Julian was at a client meeting. The life they'd built, the lazy mornings, the shared dreams, was real. But so was the ache for the future he'd abandoned. He imagined telling Julian. Imagine the hurt in those warm brown eyes. Could he do it again? Uproot everything for a dream that might not even pan out? When Julian came home, Cooper was sitting on the couch, the email open on his phone. "I need to tell you something," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. Julian's face fell, as if he sensed what was coming. Cooper explained the fellowship, New York, the chance to reclaim his dream. "I didn't think I'd get this far," he admitted. "But I applied, and I got in." Julian was silent for a long moment, his jaw tight. "When were you going to tell me?" he asked finally, his voice low. "After you'd already decided to leave?" "I haven't decided," Cooper said, but the words fell hollow. "You applied without telling me. That's a decision." Co-op. Julian stood, running a hand through his hair. "I thought we were building something together. Was I wrong?" Cooper wanted to argue, to say it wasn't about Julian, but the truth was messy, eh? He loved Julian, but he couldn't shake the feeling that he'd lost himself in that love. "I need this," he said. "I need to know who I am without you." Julian's eyes glistened, but he didn't cry. "If you go," he said, "I don't know if I can wait for you." The words cut deeper than Cooper expected. They didn't speak for the rest of the night, the apartment suffocating in its silence. Cooper didn't sleep. He lay beside Julian, their bodies inches apart but worlds away. The fellowship loomed like a ticking clock, each second pulling him closer to a decision that would define his life. The next morning, Julian left for the studio without a word, his absence louder than any argument. Cooper went to work, but his mind was elsewhere. The nonprofit's office, usually a refuge, felt stifling. He saw his own fear reflected in the kids he helped, fear of being left behind, of not being enough. He wondered if Julian felt that fear now, too. He called Ellie that afternoon, needing her clarity. "You followed your heart once," she said, her voice steady through the phone. "Maybe it's time to follow your head." "But what if I lose him?" Cooper asked, his voice breaking. Ellie sighed. "What if you lose yourself?" The question haunted him. That evening, he found Julian at the community center site, a half-finished skeleton of steel and concrete. Julian was alone, sketching under a floodlight, his face etched with focus. Cooper watched him for a moment, struck by how beautiful he was, how much he loved him. "I don't want to lose you," Cooper said, stepping into the light. Julian looked up, his expression guarded. "Then why does it feel like you're already gone?" They talked for hours, their voices echoing in the empty construction site. Cooper poured out his fears of failure, of regret, of becoming someone he didn't recognize. Julian listened, his anger softening into something sadder. "I thought we were enough," he said. "I thought I was enough." "You are," Cooper said, tears stinging his eyes. "But I need to do this." "For me," Julian nodded, but the distance between them felt unbridgeable. "If you go," he said, "I'll support you. But I can't promise I'll be here when you come back." Cooper left for New York 2 weeks later. The farewell was quiet, a single kiss that felt like goodbye. He boarded the plane with a suitcase and a heart full of what-ifs, chasing a dream that now felt like a betrayal. New York was a whirlwind. The fellowship was intense, long hours, endless cases, a chance to prove himself. Cooper thrived, but every victory was hollow. He missed Julian's laugh, his warmth, the way he made every moment brighter. Late at night, he'd scroll through old photos, their life in San Francisco a distant memory. Then, a month into the fellowship, he got a call from Julian. "The community center's done," he said, his voice steady but distant. "You should see it." Cooper's heart ached. "I'm proud of you," he said, meaning it. "Thanks," Julian replied. "Take care." Co-op. The line went dead, and Cooper knew it was over. New York was relentless, but Cooper was relentless too. The fellowship became his lifeline, a way to drown out the ache of losing Julian. He worked late, took on extra cases, earned praise from mentors who saw his potential. But every night, alone in his tiny studio, he felt the weight of his choices. He tried to move on. He went on dates. Met older men, kind, handsome, interested. But none of them were Julian. None of them had his fire, his quiet strength, the way he could make Cooper feel like the only person in the world. 6 months into the fellowship, Cooper was assigned a high-profile case, a queer teenager facing discrimination at school. The case hit close to home, reminding him of the work he'd done in San Francisco, of the life he'd left behind. He won the case, a small victory that felt monumental. But as he stood in the courtroom, he realized he was fighting for others while neglecting his own heart. He called Julian that night, his hands shaking. "I miss you," he said when Julian picked up. There was a long pause. "I miss you too," Julian said, his voice soft. "But I'm not the same person I was, Coop. And neither are you." They talked for an hour, catching up on their lives. Julian's community center was a success, featured in magazines, a symbol of hope for queer youth. Cooper shared his own victories, his voice cracking with pride and regret. "I thought this was what I wanted," he admitted. "But I keep thinking about you." Julian didn't respond right away. "I'm seeing someone," he said finally. "It's new, but it's good." The words were a punch to the gut. Cooper forced a smile, even though Julian couldn't see it. "I'm happy for you," he lied. After they hung up, Cooper sat in the dark, his phone still in his hand. He'd chosen his dream, but at what cost? He'd gained a career, but lost the person who made it all matter. The next day, he threw himself back into work, but the spark was gone. He started questioning everything, his ambition, his choices, the life he was building. He wondered if he'd made the right call, if he'd ever find balance between love and ambition. Then, an email arrived. An invitation to the community center's grand opening in San Francisco. Julian had sent it. A simple note attached. "You helped make this possible. I'd love for you to see it." Cooper stared at the email, his heart racing. It wasn't a promise, wasn't a reconciliation, but it was a chance. Cooper boarded the flight to San Francisco with a mix of hope and dread. The community center's grand opening was in 2 days, and he hadn't told Julian he was coming. He didn't know what he expected: closure, reconciliation, or just a chance to see Julian one more time. The city felt different now, both familiar and foreign. Cooper walked the Mission District, passing their old apartment, the memories flooding back. He remembered the laughter, the fights, the way Julian's touch grounded him. He wondered if he'd thrown it all away for a dream that wasn't even his anymore. The grand opening was a celebration. Music, speeches, a crowd of people gathered to honor Julian's vision. The community center was stunning, all clean lines and warm light, a testament to Julian's talent. Cooper stood at the back, watching Julian speak, his voice steady and passionate. He looked happy, whole, and Cooper's heart ached with pride and loss. After the ceremony, their eyes met across the room. Julian's smile was cautious but genuine. "You came," he said, walking over. "I had to see it," Cooper replied. "It's incredible, Julian. You're incredible." They stepped outside, the night air cool against their skin. For a moment, it was just them, the city humming around them. "I'm sorry," Cooper said, the words spilling out. "For leaving, for not trusting what we had." Julian looked at him, his eyes soft but guarded. "I'm not the same person I was, Coop. I moved on. But I'll always care about you." The words hurt, but they were honest. Cooper nodded, swallowing the lump in his throat. "I'm proud of you," he said. "And I'm figuring out who I am. Maybe I needed to lose you to find that." Julian smiled, A small, sad smile. Maybe we both needed to lose something to grow. They parted with a hug. Not a promise, but a moment of peace. Cooper flew back to New York the next day, carrying the weight of his choices, but also a new clarity. He'd given up his scholarship for love, and one click had set him on a path he couldn't have predicted. But it wasn't the end. In the months that followed, Cooper threw himself into his work with renewed purpose. He took on cases that mattered, fought for people who needed him. He didn't forget Julian, but he learned to live with the ache, to let it fuel him rather than define him. He'd lost love, but he'd found himself. And in the end, that was enough.